Hello internet friends, my name is Catherine and I'm the human behind Christian Miss Couture, and today is another Color Wheel Monday, the series in which I make my way through color theory one color at a time. So we're continuing our mission to do all the secondary colors. So we are still working on ultraviolet, and today we will be adding fire engine red to it, just so we can see the difference it brings and how more warm we're going to have our ultraviolet. So it's just a fun exercise to see also the potency of fire engine red, because I feel like it mesh better than other colors that are more potent and just like wants to be the main character. So the goal of this series is truly to explore the color theory and how color interacts with each other, and also to see it dyed on yarn, because some yarns are more cream colored and some of them are gray. So it's important to have an idea of how it's going to be interacting with the colors that we have. So it's just a fun exercise, and since those colors are part of the starter kit that you can purchase on Dharma Trading Co. website, it's just so you don't purchase an entire stash of different colors, and you can start playing with them and understand color theory. So you don't need to purchase secondary color, tertiary colors from them right away, and that way you can like have less expense, and there's citric acid that comes with that as well. So it's just like a good idea for a starter pack. So let's get into today. Welcome back to another Color Wheel Monday, the series in which I make my way through color theory one color at a time, and we have completely finished our primary color triangle. So now we are currently working on the violet. So this is the secondary color triangle from the color wheel. After we're done with the violet, we'll be working orange and green, because I have those and they are included in the starter pack that you can purchase from Dharma Trading Co. when you're purchasing their little kit with some citric acid and all. So it's important to be able to explore all those possibilities. So we've already added our brilliant yellow to our electric violet. So we're going to be adding today fire engine red. So we're going to make a stock solution. What is a stock solution? It is the diluted or the liquid form of our dry powders. So when you're working this, it is very important that you protect your lungs. You only have one pair of lungs, so please protect it. How you can do this is by wearing a respirator that is made for fine particles. So it doesn't have to be this exact brand. I have this since I started working with acid dyes, and you replace the filter. But there is different options out there. You don't have to purchase this specific one. To make a stock solution, today we're going to do a 1% stock solution, which is 1 gram of the dry powder mixed with 100 milliliter of our water. So, and it's important to note that I'm boiling my water first. It doesn't have to be boiling, but it has to be hot enough to help dissolve the dry powders. So this is what we're going to be doing. I'll be muffled a little bit because I will be wearing my respirator. And it's also important to double check that all the straps are good and that you're in good. And it's important also to make sure that your scale is at 0. Since I'm going to be making more ultraviolet later this week, I'll be doing a little bit more than just 1 gram. I'll probably just do a 2. It doesn't always happen that I have it right on the dot. Okay, so we're at 0. No, yep, I'm good today. It very happens that way. I usually have issues with my reds sometimes when it comes to mixing the color, because sometimes it looks like cloth, and yeah, so I just always triple check with my reds. to make sure that we have the proper consistency, I would say. Okay, so we're going to be grabbing our mason jars so that we'll be able to do our mixes of dye in the jars so that we can swatch the color. So what we're doing right now is called color swatching. So this is something that you could be doing just with paper tissues. However, those are not always accurate when it comes to your final color. So this is why I prefer to swatch on mini skeins. So we're going to be using 10-gram mini skeins of fingering stroll from Knit Picks because they come in 10 grams, so it's easier to do swatch with 1% stock solutions. Because, for example, if you want a 1% depth of shades, you only need 10 milliliter of your 1% stock solution. So there's a little bit of math when it comes to yarn dyeing, and that's important to know. Basically, this is pretty easy when you're using the metric system, so that's why we are doing it this way here. Yes, so we're color swatching on this mini skeins because there's a lot of things that affect the final color of your yarn. So there is the temperature that helps to set the color of your yarn, but there's also the citric acid. Sometimes you do not have the final color that you're going to obtain until you've put your citric acid in, until you've applied the heat to it. So this is why I find it important, when you can afford it, to swatch as much as possible on your mini skeins. And it's honestly, yes, you can purchase the mini skeins. It's less expensive at the end of the day if you are able to purchase either a cone of yarn or just your full skeins, and that you're dividing your full skeins into 10-gram mini skeins. This is something that you can do if you have a nididati for other purposes. You can use it to create mini skeins, and that way you don't have to spend as much, because mini skeins are expensive, unfortunately. Yes, so what I just did is I added 10 milliliter of this 1% stock solution from our ultraviolet that we just did a few minutes ago in each of the mason jars, because I want the ultraviolet to be the main character in this. And now what we're going to do is we're going to be adding the fire engine red. So we're going to do it by up from 0.05% depth of shade up to 1% depth of shade for the fire engine red. So that way we can have a good range of hues and colors and see how impactful the red will be on the final color of the ultraviolet mixed. So that way it's just to give us a good idea of what was going to happen when you mix your colors. So we are going to do that. So here we're going to do a 0.05, well, 5, yeah, milliliter. Not, oh gosh, it's hard. Here we're doing 1 milliliter. Here we're going to do 2.5. So it might not look like anything as of right now, because ultraviolet is one of those colors that needs the citric acid and the heat to be able to settle properly. And we don't have any citric acid as of right now in the jars. What we have is just tap water. I just added 5 milliliter. Now we're going to be adding 7.5 milliliter. So I'm usually only adding my citric acid later, when we had a chance to let the color penetrate the skeins a little bit more, just so that way we can have a more even coverage of the yarn. So this is one of the reasons I'm doing it this way. But you can do whatever you want. If you add it now, you might... it's just going to start the striking process for the color earlier, and I just want to have it later. So the timing of when you're adding your citric acid is actually important. Um, Same thing with the heat. I prefer to start cool to let to give a chance to the color to penetrate properly and have an even coverage. Because sometimes if you have patchy yarn, it's either because there was too much friction or resistance within your skeins. It was not. It was still dry sometimes. So if you have some dry spots, if you had some dry spots on your skeins when you're immersing it, that spot will most likely be paler, so it won't have as much coverage on it. So we're going to be adding the skeins now. Is pulling it up and down like this helps to open up the skeins. So we don't have the biggest surface in the mason jars. And the way I do this right now helps open up the skein. So we talked a little bit earlier about resistance. So when you have resistance in your mason jars, you might encounter some dry spots that don't have access to the dye. So you would have an uneven coverage of color, which is not something that we want. So we try to have the best coverage possible. Of course, it's hand dyed, so errors can happen. We just try to minimize that as much as possible. So this is why we move the skeins up and down, remove from the, I'm also removing it from the zip ties. So because the zip ties is another things that can cause resist. So we're just trying to make sure that we cover our bases. And so far, it doesn't seem like there's much, like there is a color difference for sure. Like this one is much more on the periwinkle color, and this one is, there's more pink under like hues in it, which makes sense because we've added red. However, we won't see the final color until the color has struck and until the yarn is dry. So this is something also that you need to remember, that it's starting to look like grape. I like that. Yes, so sorry about that. When your yarn is wet, it will always be darker than what it will look like as a final result. So this is why we only show final result when the yarn is fully dry. Okay, we're good. We're going to be adding this into our double boiler and we will be back. Okay, so we're going to turn it on right now because it will take a little bit longer for the water to reach the proper temperature. So we want the water to be between 85 to 95 Celsius, so that way you know that you're at the right temperature, first of all. But your color won't stick to your yarn if it's under that temperature. So if you feel like the temperature is good, you can always double check it and everything. But if you don't have that 85 to 95 Celsius, it's not going to stick. And we still do not have any citric acid. I'm going to wait about 15 minutes before adding it to the mason jars because I want to ensure that we have a slower absorption rate of the color so that it will strike slow in a slow manner. So we have a more even color coverage. This is my goal with this. So we're going to just let it enjoy its little bath, and we will be back in like 15 minutes. Okay, so it's been 15 minutes, and we're going to be adding the citric acid in our jars so that this can start to extract properly. And the water is slowly getting there. So as soon as it's hitting the 85 to 95 Celsius, we are going to do a countdown of half an hour to let the yarn cook properly, and we'll see you after that. So see you in a bit. Okay, let's see. Okay, it looks like the color has fully struck. Yes. So now what we're going to do is we are going to be turning off. This looks like a very pretty raspberry color. Sorry. Okay, so what we're going to do is currently we're going to let this completely cool over for a little bit. Once it's completely cooled off, we're going to be washing the excess off, and we're going to let it dry overnight. One thing I forgot to mention a little bit earlier about the citric acid is that the rule of thumb is 1 tablespoon of the per pound. So 1 tablespoon of citric acid per pound of yarn. So 454 grams. And since it's 10-gram mini skeins, we've added like less than half a teaspoon in each of the mason jars. Depending on when you're adding it, sometimes it creates like a glazed effect. But since we waited for the water to warm up a little bit, it's not going to create the glazed effect, because to create the glazed effect you need the water to be super hot with a lot of citric acid. Okay, so we're going to let it cool off, and we're going to come back to wash it later. Okay, so we're not expecting a whole lot of bleeding. I will show you in just an instant the mason jars, but it was pretty clean when I removed all of it. So all the color is supposed to be in the skeins. And ultraviolet is not a known bleeder, and I never really truly had any issues with fire engine red. Poinsettia, it's another story, but fire engine red, I haven't had any issues with it overly bleeding. It is a red, so it's always something that you need to be aware of, that there might be some bleeding. So that's why if you're going to be working with red and white, I do highly recommend that you're washing it off, your finished object, in a cool, not cold, but cool water with a gentle detergent that is for yarn specifically, and also a color catcher. That's honestly your best bet when it comes to reds, because you never know. You can do all you want, but red is one of those colors that might be bleeding. I'm not exactly sure which components in the poinsettia that makes it a bleeder compared to fire engine red, so this is something that is very interesting, and I'm not exactly certain of it. But what we're going to do after washing off we don't have any bleeding, which is fantastic, we're going to be putting it in the spin dryer and let it dry overnight, so that way we can show the result in an instant. And here's the mason jars, and you can see that they're clean, which we love. And here's the final result for adding fire engine red to our ultraviolet. So you can see here that the ultraviolet is still there, but it has given warmer tone to it, which is what I was expecting with that little quantity of fire engine red, and up until like a kind of a raspberry color, which is very pretty. I can show you the difference. So this is when we have had our fire engine red as the main character, and just adding a tiny bit of the ultraviolet, and you can see that it's fitting really well right in. So there's not much difference when it comes to adding like the primary color to a secondary color. It's just going to tone down a little bit of that secondary color, which isn't fine. It really depends on what you're going for and what you want to do. It's just a fun exercise also to understand how the quantity and like the fraction of each color is available in your color and like stuff like that. So it's really just to see how it interact with each other and how much it has an impact at the end, because basically we could have obtained the exact same colors with just swapping up a little bit of the Caribbean blue and the fire engine red to create a similar color. So we could recreate this color using primer colors, rather like not necessarily easily. We would have to like touch up a little bit the color for sure, but we would have something. So if you liked the video, please consider sharing, liking, and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one very soon. Bye!